your turn. Let's see who's the first brave person to ask Gabriela a question. Yes, there and back.
I was wondering if your opinion about SeaWorld and about just keeping whales in captivity changed at all over the course of researching the film. Like if you kind of had a certain idea going into it, whether that changed.
Definitely. And actually, before I answer that question, I do want to invite some special people to come up here and answer the questions with me. I have Jeff Ventre. Woo! Carol Ray. Samantha Bird, just come on up. All y'all. And Howard Garrett, wherever you are. Please come up and join us. So in answer to your question, yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you've read anything about the film up until now, but I am a mother. I'm a documentary filmmaker. Was looking for ideas and was very interested in this story when I found out that Dawn Brancheau was killed. I was sort of shocked, and it just sounded very terrifying and horrific. But I am a mother who took her kids to SeaWorld, so I started off on this end of the spectrum. So to answer your question, yes, over the course of 2 years, I just kind of couldn't believe what I learned after sort of peeling back the onion and figuring out what was really going on at that park. And all parks, I am absolutely a changed person.
We have a question right there. Go ahead.
What's the state of anti-SeaWorld animal rights activism? Sorry, what's the state of anti-SeaWorld animal rights activism right now?
One of you want to grab that?
If any.
I mean, there's a ton. Yeah. Do you want to talk about? I mean, there's the Humane Society. There's PETA. There's the Non-Human Rights Project as well. There's quite a bit of activity out there right now. Yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah. I think. Well, first of all, I want to say hello, Seattle, and thank you so much for coming. I'm a Seattleite myself, so I know that SIF offers awesome films, and you guys chose to be here, and I can't thank you enough for that. One of the places that I would direct you is maybe to our website, which is Voice of the Orcas, where the ex-trainers have kind of gotten together, and it's sort of a clearinghouse for all things orcas in captivity, and places that it can farm you out to if you have interests in different issues related to orcas in general, orcas in captivity. Certainly feels like there's this sea change of activity happening within the animal rights, anti-captivity movement. And I think a part of that has to do certainly with the code that came out a few years ago that all of you are probably familiar with. Yeah, awesome. But now hopefully this is just taking things to another level, and I have to thank Gabriela for that for sure.
Yeah.
Please bring them on. Yes, over there.
So just to repeat that, VOTO, V-O-T-O, is the website, which is, as Carol was describing, the landing pad for learning more things about this and learning about sort of what we hope to do from this film.
Question over here.
I got a feeling throughout the film that you were kind of going back and forth between arguing against whales in captivity from the standpoint of it's not practical, it's not safe to keep them in captivity, to have humans alongside them, versus it is wrong to have them in captivity. And I really, as the film went on, I felt like you were coming down more on the it's not practical, it's not safe side of things. Was there a particular direction you were looking to go, and if so, why?
I didn't think too much about being sort of even-handed about both of those approaches. To me, I knew that there were films out there and there's advocacy out there that discusses some of the ethical issues. I wanted this film to hit the issue from every angle. So in a lot of ways, I sort of felt like some of the former trainers. Well, I do feel like the trainers there are victimized by that system as well. They're paid nothing. Their backs, their knees, their ears, everything is, they're under terrible physical stress over a huge amount of time. The reason they're there is because they love these whales. The reason they sort of can't leave, is because of that. And so, SeaWorld's able to sort of use love as leverage, to keep them sort of doing what they have to do. I thought it was a really powerful, sort of important point to make. And again, I just sort of, I kind of wanted to I guess, you know, if you were going to come in and you already understood that maybe the whale issue, and you know that they're not suitable for captivity. I also wanted to be able to hit groups of people that doesn't necessarily resonate with them, you know, that doesn't resonate with them at all, that they're just more sort of terrified for people and for the depraved kind of conditions at that park. And you know, it all exists, you know, they do all of it. SeaWorld sort of treats all of these things terribly, so yeah.
We have a question.
You in your interviews with some of the ex-trainers, you mentioned that they didn't really know what was going on and they sort of swallowed the corporate line. Have you done any program of outreach with the ex-trainers to the current trainers that are there? Is it at this point that they can claim that they're still ignorant of the situation?
Yeah, thanks everybody for being here. It's really an honor to be in Seattle. This is kind of where I'll be. One of the things that you see in the film is John Hargrove, and there's another girl that's got a cameo in the film called Bridget Pirtle, and they both left after Dawn was killed, and they were first made aware of kind of what the goings on based on our website, Voice of the Orcas. I'm not trying to plug it. I'm just saying there was a communication that went on, and so more trainers are kind of being made aware of this in real time, like right now. But a lot of them, as John Hargrove is fond of saying, are kind of stuck, if that makes sense. A lot of them have met their spouses at SeaWorld. There's a lot of couples that now have children, and they really don't have anything else to do. I mean, learning to train killer whales doesn't really train you for much else. And so they're kind of stuck, and John Hargrove, he's not here today. He lives in New York, and I can't wait to see him. But what he said was that secretly, behind the scenes, everyone's kind of rooting for us, but they can't be too open about that because they're literally their lifestyles at stake. So there is some communication going on, but it's kind of on the down low, so to speak.
And can I add one thing is that those of us up here, we've been out of the industry for long enough that we don't feel concerned about our jobs. We're not worried that, you know, what's SeaWorld going to do, fire us? So for the people that are still working there is still a little bit of that fear, and I think by us stepping forward, it is going to allow more people to make that leap and step out and start speaking out against the company.
We have a question over here.
Were you able to contact any of the trainers who survived those attacks that you showed on the screen?
I tried very, very hard. They're, for whatever reason, I think you can do the math on this one, perhaps not permitted to speak ever again. I don't know if that smells of a settlement. I don't know. I can't verify any of that. But I do know that I tried very hard to find them, but nobody talks.
More questions? See if you can yell loud enough.
Well, first a comment, I thought you did such a great job showing how the trainers, and the trainers also, you have these mixed emotions and you never demonize the whale, even though this behavior is awful, because you've been working with them and loving them and having this great, you can see the kind of emotional connection, or I don't know if it really all comes down to food, but I thought you did a great job not demonizing the whale, and I wanted to hear from the trainers, what is that like, knowing the power that these animals can do this, but you've had such a long relationship with them?
Sure. So am I understanding the question is about knowing, right? Well, you know, honestly, when I was working there, I guess I can only speak for myself, and my views have changed slightly over time as I've been able to distance myself from my experience there. You know, honestly, when I was there, I certainly did feel like I had very special bonds and connections with the animals that I was working with there, absolutely. And there were next to no incidents that I felt like I was in danger. That didn't cross my mind. And whether that was because, and I was there at the same time as Jeff and Samantha after John Sillick was injured, and I knew nothing about that incident. I don't know if it was purely out of ignorance or just the belief that I had such a strong bond with the animals that I was interacting with that I just didn't need to worry about it. Again, just completely naive. Looking back on it, though, the incidents that I saw with, for example, at the time we had a large male bull orca that essentially filled the same responsibilities as Tilikum. He was an adult male that was there primarily for breeding, and he was a very aggressive whale. And there were times where I saw that animal come out at my supervisors or people that were working with him, and in those instances, and watching him be self-injurious, those times I was frightened. There were periods of times where that was frightening. But you know, you put that aside because you want to interact with the whales.
We have a question over here.
Okay, first, can I just say that that was amazing, so thank you so much. But I'm curious, when you started out on this project, was your intention to focus primarily on SeaWorld itself? I know there are many parks in North America, and here with the Southern Resident Orcas, I know that you touched briefly on the initial capturing here, and I just wasn't sure why you chose to focus just on Tilikum.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think one thing I was sure about when I started making this movie was that I wanted it to feel, like narrative driven. So I didn't want you to be sort of sitting in here and feel like you were watching a movie with a bunch of facts shoehorned in so that you feel angry or you feel sad. I didn't want it to feel like, there was an agenda, because honestly, starting out, all I knew how to do was to tell a story. And so I just figured if I sort of stayed with the narrative and stayed with the story of Tilikum and Dawn, that the facts would speak more powerfully for themselves and sort of by themselves, without me sort of, trying too hard to make you feel something. So to me, I was sure that I kind of wanted to do that with this film, because I thought that the story, with no agenda, with no activism, anything, was so powerful. I mean, it haunted me. I couldn't believe I had been bringing my kids there. I couldn't believe how I didn't know about the Penn Cove captures. I mean, I had no idea about that. So to me, that was a way of, bringing this film to you, I think, and allowing you guys to sort of experience what I did and experience sort of a fact-driven story, and then kind of make your own decision based on that.
A question for Mr. Garrett. If the SeaWorlds were closed down, could the whales be reassimilated into the wild after so many years in captivity?
Right, thanks. Well, that's something we've all thought about a lot. And it's not that simple. They can't just be released into the ocean and wave goodbye and they swim off into the sunset for the most part. There may be a few that could go through a carefully phased rehabilitation program and be able to be released, if they can be released into a family, if they can be accepted. Orcas are just the most social mammals known to science, and they just can't, swim out there by themselves. There are lone transients that are seen, but really their whole range and their awareness and their relationships are over miles and miles and weeks and years. And so when you see a solo male transient mammal-eating orca, which is the only kind you do see, they're not really alone. They really are still connected with their families. So you couldn't extract one from a concrete tank and just plop it into an ocean and expect it to do well. So there would have to be a very, carefully set up rehabilitation program, a sea pen, really a retirement center, and without great expectations of being able to take it beyond that, and be able to, interact with them, give them all the comforts, all the veterinary services, really all the companionship that they would have in a box, except in a natural setting, and gradually expand that with what are called boat follows, which worked with Keiko, worked with U.S. Navy orcas in the 60s and 70s, which is where they are led out into the open with a boat that has an acoustic signal that they know, and so they'll come back to if they get out of reach, and a very sort of carefully phased program like that. And then eventually, probably the best hope is that they would have access to the wide open ocean, but with nowhere to come back for food, for companionship, for the people that they know. They really can bond with humans. I mean, their preference, I'm sure, is their family. So if they can reunite with other orcas, that's far better. But in the absence of that, most seem to be able to accept relationships with humans. So that could be sustained, for their entire lifetime.
Hi, thanks for the movie over here. So a lot of the footage of the accidents was obviously really powerful and striking, so I was wondering if you could talk about if that was hard to acquire, that footage, and where did you get it from? But also I was wondering if you had footage of Dawn's accident and if you chose to not show it, or if that was not available.
As the answer to the first question, the accident footage was actually made available to me through FOIA, through Freedom of Information Act, after OSHA sued SeaWorld. So because of that, there were these things that were eventually going to become sort of public record. So it took a lot of perseverance, but after a year or so, I was able to get some of those exhibits because they were sort of evidence for the case. In terms of Dawn's, the death tape, it exists. It's hopefully sealed off in a vault, sort of never to be seen. The family's fighting very hard to keep that there. And in terms of, I would never have done that. I would never have shown that. I didn't, I want children to be able to see this movie. And also there was just sort of no, in my opinion, no educational value to seeing that. You can learn everything about that from the autopsy reports. And I just have to, live with this film forever. So I could not have done that to the family. No, it's a question we get a lot. We have a question up here.
This is a question for the trainers. I'm curious, what was your relationship with your supervisors? Like, in terms of the chain of command, and how did this just relationship in general between all of you, like, I just can't imagine working in an environment where you have this pressure, and then there's also things that are constantly being concealed, and so how did you deal with that on a daily basis?
When I talk about what it's like to work at SeaWorld, I tell people if the airline industry operated the way SeaWorld works, there would be planes falling out of the sky. So it's the way it's set up, it's kind of, I guess you have to imagine a cult. I've come to think about more and more as being in a cult. And you want, anybody who's working at the park is there because they want to be there, because I started at $7.50 an hour. So I don't know about you, but I wanted to do it bad enough that I was willing to do it for $7.50 an hour. And then at that point, the more you get into the company and the more that you see, you're sort of more under pressure to not say anything because you want to get in the water and you want to swim with the animals. And so, and as you saw in the movie, because trainers were often blamed for the mistakes, then they were less willing to bring things forward. So if you happen to be at a show when an accident happened, or you happen to be around during a training session when an accident happened and it didn't seem severe enough to report it, you might know about it, but maybe everyone else at the stadium wouldn't know about it. So there was I would definitely say there was quite a bit of, the experience is that if you didn't need to know something as far as the supervisors were concerned, then you weren't told. And for 20 years, basically, I believed that Telecom had nothing to do with Kelty Burns' death in 1991, because that's what management actually told me, was that Kelty Burn died of hypothermia, and that the 2 female whales were responsible for her death. And in fact, a day after Dawn Brancho died, I happened to be at a high school doing a talk, and I lied to a whole other group of high school students almost 20 years later. So I would say it's a lot about keeping things. If you don't need to know it, then you probably wouldn't hear about it.
So we have time for about 2 more questions. It looks like there's someone in the second row. He has his hand up, and there's one more question back here.
I guess the real question is, what now? We talked about kind of what the best solution is, but as we saw with the code, that came out 3 years ago, and I was there in January, and nothing has changed in the code. David and Goliath, you guys are up against a huge corporation that, is already running their summer ads and making assault
We do hear, just, I'm going to give this over to Jeff, but we do have some more, they definitely know we're here. Their legal team, SeaWorld's legal team showed up to Sundance Film Festival and, barraged us with questions. So, apparently they realized that we're here. We're going to be released in theaters this July. So we're going to sort of see. So thank you, Magnolia Films. And then in CNN Films will be on TV. So I feel like we're going to get the breadth with that. This is something that Middle America is going to. You don't have to live or whatever, be in a place where there's a theater. You're going to be able to catch it on cable. So this is good in terms of spreading the word. I'm going to give it over to Jeff for what to do, but we've got strong ideas.
Well, thanks again. It's a great question, and we've thought a lot about this because I worked at SeaWorld up through the mid-'90s, and John Jett is one of my great friends. We've been talking about this for so long, and the change has been so very slow. One of the things that Gabriela was able to do in 83, or I keep reading different durations, 83 minutes, or however long the film is kind of compartmentalize this into something that's really digestible. And she's made such a great film. There's a lot of buzz about the film. So hopefully this film will get to millions of folks that care about the topic. I think that there's been an evolution in thinking about this. I mean, look, all of us were sucked in by the illusion that SeaWorld had created. And then, what we found out once we got there, that it was a sea circus. I grew up in the 80s and 90s thinking that this was going to be the pinnacle of research, on marine mammals, and I got in there and it's more like kind of like that. So there was an evolution that occurred, and all of us, at least the three of us up here, and Howie too, we had to go back and actually rebuild our lives. And so now we've been given this voice. I was pretty good friends with Don Branchow at one point. But I think there's a book called Death at SeaWorld that kind of was an independent work that you might want to look up online. It's got a lot of facts in it that can help drive this conversation along with Gabriela's movie. But I think we're just now getting to the point in society where everyone's kind of ready for this conversation. And so I just encourage people to watch the film and use it as a tool to help educate people, and hopefully it'll just continue to spread from city to city. And thank God, it got picked up by Magnolia, and it's going to the Southern Hemisphere and Europe, and it's going to have a big splash. And yeah, don't buy a ticket. Come to our website. We can help direct people there. At least Sam and I are on Twitter. You can get some information like that. But with social networking and Facebook and stuff like that, the word's getting out, and we just need everyone's help to help spread it. So that's it.
We have one last question up here.
I think your timing is pretty important because in April, the news stated that OSHA and SeaWorld were entering into mediation talks with allowing trainers back into the water for certain segments. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. As far as I know right now, the rules are still in place that the trainers are not able to interact with the animals except from behind a barrier. But what's going on behind the scenes is that SeaWorld is arguing about what actually constitutes a barrier between them and the whales. So at this point, SeaWorld is actually arguing that the stage areas and also the slide out areas can be considered a barrier because the whales don't have as much mobility. And so therefore the trainers can get closer to the animals when they're on the stage or when they're in a slide out area. But of course, as we know from the movie, Dawn was pulled in off of a slide out area. So, so there is some more stuff happening with the OSHA case, and I think things are going to be showing up in the media here in another week or two. There'll be another round between SeaWorld and OSHA.
Please continue. Say one more thing about that. My understanding is that, unfortunately, with the OSHA citations, one of the things that was stipulated was that it is during shows that they're unable to do water work. And so they are actually starting to do some water work in the back areas, not during public performances, in their med pools and that sort of thing. So SeaWorld's certainly eager to get back in there and get in the water, but we'll see what happens with that.
Thank you. Please join me in giving them a warm round of applause. Don't forget to vote.